Well, Kieran, this final debate, which, as you know, focused on foreign policy, was fascinating, not in that it broke any new policy ground, but in the repositioning that we saw from Mitt Romney. He had been critical of Barack Obama on a number of fronts, Libya in particular. He's also been critical about setting a deadline for the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and Iran as well, not being tough enough on Iran. But what we saw last night from the Republican contender was certainly a different tone, if not a new position from him on each of these key issues. He's now trying to show very little difference between himself and the president as we do get closer and closer to this election in what is an extremely close contest. He does not want to open up new fronts on these areas. He clearly wants the battle to be fought in the remaining fortnight on the domestic policy front, which is, of course, of most concern for the American electorate. This has frustrated Barack Obama, no doubt about it, the repositioning from Mitt Romney, not just on foreign policy, but as he sees it, on domestic issues as well. He's coined the phrase Romnesia for this, and he was using it again today on the stump at a campaign rally in Florida. Now we will see in this final fortnight some frantic campaigning through the battleground states. They will blitz as many of the swing states as they can, and it will really all come down to how good their grassroots networks are in these states and how much money they've got to spend. Hundreds of millions have already been spent and nothing will be left to chance. Don't worry about that in this final fortnight. I spoke earlier today to Matt Browne. He's from the Centre for American Progress, which is a group here that links together politicians, parties and strategists around the world from centre-left parties and political movements. He's also worked on 3 of Tony Blair's campaigns in the UK, but has been in the US for the last 4 years, watching this campaign very closely. And we talked about how the campaigning is now being conducted and the impact of the 3 debates. Well, Matt, the general takeout from the final debate seems to be that Barack Obama won. The polls show that as well. Do you agree with that, firstly, and do you think it's going to give him enough momentum going into the final weeks of this campaign?
Look, I think the snap polls after last night's debate are clearly in favour of the president. Most of them have him between 25 and 32 points ahead in terms of who won the debate. In terms of the question of momentum, it's clear that the first debate was the one that changed the momentum of the campaign, both in terms of validating Romney's decision to try and run as a sort of centrist rather than as a Tea Party Republican candidate. I think if he hadn't been successful in that first debate, you would have heard a lot more complaining than you have done from conservatives. But I think from the vice presidential debate onwards, what you've seen is that tide has slowly been stemmed by the response of the vice president and over the last 2 presidential debates, the president himself. So I think it's less a question of momentum and more a question of halting a tide that seems to be moving in Romney's favour. And in that regard, yes, I think he's done what he needs to do.
Is it fair to say that the debates in this campaign have been more significant, more important than previous campaigns, particularly that first debate?
I think that looking at things right now, you could make that analysis. I think the jury is out on that, and I think that's for 2 reasons. One, historically, incumbent presidents do badly in the first debate. Everybody remembers, how Reagan wiped the floor with Mondale in the debates, but actually the first debate, Mondale won. People forget that. So it's unclear at the moment how that is. I think what we have are two competing situations. The first is that you have the air wars, and so clearly in terms of national polls and in terms of likability, Romney seems to have used the debates very well. He's attempted to put himself on an equal footing with the president. He has tried to, I think in last night's debate, he tried to show that he was a safe option, not dangerous. So he's tried to undermine some of the attack that the Obama campaign has laid against him. But the big question is really, what are the ground games doing? So there's an enormous amount of money being spent in terms of voter identification, registration, and the get out the vote. People are voting now already in the early voting states, and I think the big question will be in the key battleground states, how good an operation does Romney have vis-a-vis the Obama campaign, which has a sort of an unprecedented, sophisticated GOTB.
Well, just on that, does the Republican machine have a much better operation this time around than 4 years ago, and how?
So I think what you should do is distinguish between two things, between the Republican machine or the Romney campaign, and then there's an unprecedented amount of outside money going into this electoral cycle. So if you look at organizations like Crossroads USA, which is a group funded by the Koch brothers and supported by and run by Karl Rove. This is an organization that has 75 field staffers that are essentially doing field operation in Ohio alone. So there's a parallel organization there that are using perhaps more sophisticated techniques than the Romney campaign itself. Now they're not actually working on behalf of Romney, they're running on conservative issues. But it's clear who their preferred candidate would be and who the people they turn out to the polls will likely vote for. And so that's the great unknown right now. And if you remember in 2004, people expected John Kerry to be far more competitive, and what surprised people was that below the radar, actually, Karl Rove had helped find 3 million new voters on the Republican side of the ticket. I do not suspect that will happen this time around, and I also think that the field operation of the Obama campaign is very, very solid.
Matt Browne, thank you.
Thank you.